Throughout history, no, throughout all of time, man has typically settled conflict with the thing they know best: violence. 2 million years ago, the first knives were made. Around 3300 BC is when we find the first traces of swords. Guns came into being in the 10th century, and we've been developing our methods of combat ever since. But if there's one tried and true method for getting your point across to your combatant, I prefer the good old fist. Whereas a knife or a gun can easily stop your opponent from continuing the fight, a fist tends to drag fights out a little bit. And that's not to say a fist can't end the fight immediately or even a life, because they absolutely can. Look at things like the UFC or the MMA. These combatants wear gloves not only to protect their own hands, but more importantly because bare-knuckle boxing is extremely dangerous and has often led to an early lifespan. But what makes a fist so great compared to a knife or any other weapon is the passion behind it. A punch often carries weight and emotion behind it, which makes the punch all the more cathartic when it happens. So today, I wanted to talk about the greatest punch of all time, and what in particular makes it so great. So before moving on to a few honorable mentions and then eventually the punch in question, let's talk real quick about what makes certain punches so great in the first place. While watching these plethora of anime, there are several different types of punches that you could categorize. There's the angry friend punch that hurts the protagonist because of the close bond these people have. Think Nami and Luffy. Then there's the friend punching friend to get them back on track, kind of like Naruto and Sasuke. But the punches that make you feel something, the ones that pull you to the edge of your seat as you scream, "Ah!" in the living room, at your TV, or in the bedroom at your laptop. Those punches typically have a very heavy emotional weight behind them. Fighting for justice, love, or even peace, these punches hold not only emotion, but urgency. More often than not, the best punches we see are those thrown in the opposition of oppression. And it makes sense when you think about it. All of us, you, I, and everyone in the future will falter. In one way, shape, or form, we're all weak to some regard, and it's no exaggeration to say that everyone needs a helping hand at times. So, what's more appropriate than a hand reaching out for your sake and risking everything to protect you? It's something that develops hope in others. Need an amazing example? Just take a look at the moment Luffy punched the world noble. In fact, go on YouTube or TikTok right now and look up the exact reaction to this fight, and I guarantee your first reaction the first time you saw this is almost the exact same as everyone else's. And why is that? Luffy has punched people before. There have even been awful people as villains in the story, so why did this punch feel so damn good? Well, first, the style choice. The animation going from color to black and white in a moment of intense action is always a good choice in my opinion. But also everything leading up to that punch as well. St. Charles is a piece of trash, and when a character we care about is actively put in danger due to Charles's wants and desires, it gives urgency to the punch Luffy's about to deliver. So if you add one part emotion with involving characters we enjoy, and a topic that everyone should detest, and one part urgency with events unfolding so quickly, you get a recipe for a punch so delicious that I could still taste how good it is to this very day. So with the details of what makes a good punch out of the way, let's talk a few honorable mentions before talking about the punch in question. The first punch I want to talk about is actually a barrage of punches with a character many of you may be familiar with. In each of his fights, Jotaro Kujo uses his stance Star Platinum to beat his enemies to a pulp, and in the anime his is super iconic. But when you're watching an episode of the anime and Jotaro is finishing off the villain with his barrage of hits, there's a pacing that you can hear in Star Platinum's voice that slightly indicates when he's about to wrap up his combo. However, against a character named Steely Dan, well, that just wasn't the case. See, Steely Dan is a sleazeball character who I would compare to somebody like Hody Jones or Caribou from One Piece. But what makes this villain just a tad bit different than the rest of Jotaro's rogues gallery is he actively threatens the life of a child right in front of Jotaro. My boy Jotaro over here is an upstanding gentleman. He's not going to stand for that. He's not going to let that slide. So what happens? Well, as per usual, Jotaro hits Steely Dan with his tried and true combo, but this time it just keeps going. Like to the point where I almost feel kind of bad for Steely Dan. Almost. Or how about the most recent showing from Garp in One Piece? This punch, this moment, this atmosphere is just chilling. Garp displays such a commanding presence that the magnitude of this punch cannot be overstated. The actual galaxy forming behind his punch, the smooth animation, the demonic look in Garp's eyes, all of it cultivated to a scene that's easily a 12 out of 10. And honestly, while I was preparing to write this script, I was worried I'd have to change everything because of how epic this moment is. Garp throws everything out there to save his beloved disciple, the future of the Marines. It hits everything you want in an impactful punch. And I'm not saying that my number one spot has better animation or that the character I chose is stronger than Garp. All I'm saying is that the final punch on this list carries a bit more weight to it in my opinion. Plus, it has a small unfair advantage that we'll talk about in a second. Overall, this scene is an absolute masterpiece that many anime will look to into the future for inspiration. I just really wish Naruto could have been animated to this degree. And now for the final coveted spot. This was actually a really hard decision to make on which punches I wanted to talk about in this video because there are honestly so many good ones that I can think of off the top of my head. Like, okay, you've got Kamina punching Simon to bring him back to his senses in the middle of like this super important battle. Takamura knocking out Brian Hawk after a super bloody boxing match that seemed like he was gonna lose. Saitama pulling back his punch after almost hitting Genos, and then the amazingness of the destruction behind him. All of those punches are moments in time that I'll never forget and that should definitely be talked about. But the moment out of all of these shows that will forever be etched into my brain, heart, and soul is All Might's final United States of Smash. For those of you who are unfamiliar or need a recap, let me just set the stage for a moment. In the climax of the third season of My Hero Academia, All Might, who is the strongest hero in the world, is facing his longtime villain and generational hater, All For One. Now, there are a few things to make noteworthy. First being the condition of All Might. Since the beginning of the show, it's been revealed to us that All Might is slowly losing his power, post-making Deku his disciple and passing the power of One For All. While All For One, on the other hand, has had plenty of time to scheme and use his quirk to steal other abilities to stock up on a plethora of powers designed specifically to combat against All Might. Coupled with the fact that All Might is much weaker than before, what little power he does have is currently waning, and he's having to worry about civilians around him. And then, at the peak of the battle, when it seems like the fight might go either way, All For One drops a bombshell on All Might. His master, the one who passed the power of One For All onto him and entrusted him with the future, was actually the grandmother to Shigaraki, one of the main villains All Might had been trying to apprehend this entire time. The mere thought of his master's family falling under the corruption of All For One causes All Might to scream out in anguish, and in the power scaling terms, I would definitely consider this to be a mental nerf, making the fight look even more bleak for All Might. After this, the final clash arrives. One For All uses enhancement quirks to multiply his strength and clashes with All Might, who only has one usable arm at the moment. The clash proceeds for a few seconds, and it seems as if All For One may actually overpower All Might. But in a moment of pure hope and desperation, All Might is able to summon the last remnants of One For All and reinvigorates his broken arm, resulting in the cleanest bait and switch I have ever seen. And here it is. Up to this point, we've heard All Might use various moves which are named after states in the United States plus the word Smash. So for example, Detroit Smash, California Smash, Oklahoma Smash, etc. But this always begged the question, was the final move the entire United States? And boy, we got our answer. The United States of Smash is everything All Might had in that moment, and it was glorious. I talked earlier about how this punch has a slight advantage over Garp's most recent punch, and that's the amazing performances by both Christopher Sabat and Kenta Miyake. The performance from Garp's voice actor Hiroshi Naka was amazing as well, and I really hope that Vincent Regan is able to bring his A game, because that's what it's going to boil down to for me. When I watch the scene of All Might hitting the United States of Smash, the vocal performance and the raw emotion gives me absolute chills. And usually when it comes to scenes like this, typically I think one performance ends up better than the other, but that is absolutely not the case with this scene. The vocal performance of these actors, coupled with the emotional swelling music in the background, makes for such a breathtaking scene, even if the animation isn't as smooth as current anime or the damage isn't as impressive as other showings. Now, I obviously can't show you the clips because I'll get in trouble, but down in the comment section below, I'll be linking both an HD dub and sub version of the clip, so please make sure you go watch them both, because I genuinely think that they're both as good as each other, and it's one of the best performances ever. So, with that, what do you think? Do you think punches are the coolest way to defeat an enemy in these shows, or do you prefer big flashy techniques? What's your favorite punch moment in fiction? What do you want to see me cover next? Let me know down in the comment section below. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to hit the like button down below for me. Make sure you are subscribed, that way you know when each and every single one of these videos comes out. And as always, I will see you all next time.